so chapter 13, we do financial statement analysis. So we are going to analyze both the income statement and the balance sheet to compare them like to prior years and to look for kind of reasonableness differences. So we have horizontal analysis and vertical analysis. And so the reason I'm doing this here again versus like on the whiteboard is because it's very tedious, and Excel can really help you with it. Now, granted, you'll be doing your homework in the software, so it may or may not kind of simulate something like Excel, but Excel you can put in the formulas and kind of do it. So if I do, so I'm gonna kind of just not for this particular one, I'm not gonna necessarily follow the instructions. I'm gonna do both a horizontal analysis and a vertical analysis of both the income statement and the balance sheet. So if we do a horizontal analysis of the balance sheet, let me maybe make this just a little bit bigger if I can. Hold on. Okay. At least we got the whole balance sheet on there. So then what you do for horizontal is you're going to go from one year to the next. So you could do from 2020 to 2019 and then 2021 to 2020. So we could do both of those. So if we say, okay, so from 20, and then we go down and we look at our choices, or go scan that way a little bit. Oh, my picture. Why is my picture cut off? Why did my picture kind of cut that off? All right, so I'm sorry, my picture kind of cut off the titles, but we've got sales. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it came back. All right, so sales, cost of goods sold. That leaves us gross profit, less our selling expenses and our administrative expenses. Total expense, income before tax, income tax expense, and then finally net income. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the sales. So from 2021 to 2020, you're going to take, and so I'm going to do this like in a formula, but what you're doing is you're taking 555,000 minus the 340,000 to see how much it increased. And then you're going to divide that by the prior year, so 340,000. Doesn't like my formula. Let's see. No, I don't want to accept that correction. I want to make it divided by. And then notice it's going to be a percent. Now, then you got to do that for each line item though. So then we're going to say equals cost of goods sold is 283,500 in 2021 minus 212,500 in 2020. Then we'll calculate that and then divide that by the 2020 amount. And again, it's going to be a percentage. Now here our cost of goods sold, or sorry, our gross profit is truly our sales minus our cost of goods sold. So this should work if I can get it in there. So the the 29%. Then our selling expense is going to be, again, the 102,900 minus the 46,920. solve for that first, so that's why I have that in parentheses, and then divide that difference by the 46,920. In that case, it increases by quite a bit, so it increased over 100%. Administrative expenses, same thing, so 50,668 minus 29,920. Again, calculate that first, so that's why it's in parentheses, then divide it by the 29,920. And then our total expenses, I think it's almost easier to just go with that same formula. So the 153,568 minus the 76,840. Again, solve for that first, so that's why I put it in parentheses, then divide by the 76,840. And then our income tax before expense, equals, again, parentheses 117,932 minus 50,660. Solve for that first, then divide by the 50,660. Again, those two more than doubled. Then finally, our income tax expense, well, I guess that's our income. All right, 40,880 minus the 10,370. Solve for that first, then divide by the 10,370. And then again, now that was one that went way up, but see, it's because our income went way up. And then finally, whoops, our net income, I did that again, is the 77,132 minus the 4,290 divided by the 4,290. I want that to be divided by. Then you can go in here though, because these are really all percentages. So if I go up here and make them all percents, then they change. I can add a decimal to it if I want to see a decimal, you know what I mean, make it a little bit bigger. But then that shows us each of those, how they changed from 2021 to from 2020 to 2021. So everything increased. Then we can do the same thing for 2020 to 2019. So then we push equals 340,000 minus 278,000. Solve for that first and then divide by the 278,000. And then the same thing for down the next line. Again, parentheses 212,500 minus 153,900. Parentheses divided by the 153,900. And I didn't put in my divided by, so it wants to make it multiply. There it goes. Okay, then we'll do the same thing for the gross profit. So our gross profit is 127,500 minus 124,100. Solve for that first, then divide by 124,100. Then our selling expense is parentheses 46,920 minus 5,800. Solve for that first, then divide by the 5,800. And now this is our first one that's negative. That's the first one that decreased. Then we take the 29,920 minus the 22,800. Solve for that first, and then divide by the 22,800. Going. So you can see why this is, I mean, it's kind of tedious. And again, me doing it on the board gets very boring. But so, because you just are going to go through those same mathematical steps for every single line item on here. Okay, so we're down to our income before taxes. So that is 50,660 minus the 50,500. Solve for that first and then divide by the 50,500. 50,000. Okay, then our income tax expense, 10,370 minus 15,760. Solve for that first and then divide by 15,760. This too is one that decreases. And then finally our net income, 40,290 minus 34,840. solve for that first, and then divide by the 34,840. And again, you can just go up and say, okay, these are all percentages, and I'd like them to go out one decimal. How come it's not letting me do it? So then that is, again, the horizontal analysis of the balance sheet. Now, if we want to do a vertical analysis of the balance sheet, that is obviously going up and down. So then we'll just do 2 years. So for 2020, if we do a vertical analysis, or I'm sorry, this is the income statement. Title, horizontal analysis of the income statement. Vertical analysis, again, at the So then again, now we're going up and down. So when you go up and down, you say, okay, my sales, it's going to be, everything is going to be a percent of sales. So my sales for 2021 are 555,000 divided by 555,000. So it's obviously 100%. My cost of goods sold is 283,500 divided by 555,000. My gross profit is 271,500 divided by 555,000. My selling expenses are 102,900 divided by 555,000. My administrative expenses are 50,668 divided by 555,000. My total expenses are 153,568 divided by 555,000. You can see how, like, again, it's just repetitive. Same thing. You're just taking a different number, but dividing it by the total sales. So every line item divided by total sales. So our income before tax is 117,932 divided by 555,000. Our income tax expense is 40,800 divided by 555,000. And then finally, our net income, 77,132 divided by 555,000. And again, I can highlight them and say these are percentages, and I want to make them with one decimal so we can see a little more detail. Then 2020, you do the same thing, except for you do the 2020 data. So then we take 340,000 and divide it by 340,000. And then we take 212,500 and divide that by 340,000. And then we take 127,500 divided by 340,000. And then we take 47,920 divided by 340,000. Then we're down to our administrative expenses. So 29,920 divided by 340,000. Our total expenses are 76,840 divided by 340,000. Our income before tax is 50,660 divided by 340,000. Our income tax is 10,370 divided by 340,000. And then finally, our net income, 40,290 divided by 340,000. And again, we can highlight those and say, okay, these are all percentages, and I'll go out. Now then, what we use these for, though, so like now that you have them completed, you can kind of analyze them to say, okay, what's going on? So when we go horizontally, this is saying it's either increasing or decreasing. So sales increased 63% this year. They increased 22% last year. cost of goods sold increased by that. You know what I mean? So that's what you're kind of comparing. And then anything that would jump out at you. So like, honestly, the sales is a pretty big increase. So you'd think, well, geez, why did sales go up so much? Maybe you'd want to research that a little bit. And then selling expenses, but possibly those are related. So now we've advertised more, so our sales went up. So again, but those are things that you'd know if you worked there. You might ask those questions if you were like an auditor. And then obviously then if our sales go up, our income goes up, our income tax goes up. So those ones would be expected. Then this kind of gives you everything as a percent of sales. So like our cost of goods sold as a percent of sales, that's a good trend. We were paying 62.5% of our sales on what we were making. You know what I mean? Like the cost of them. Now we're only paying 50% of the cost of what we're making. So that means we got more money coming into us. So we have a gross profit of 48% versus 37%. So again, that's a good trend. And then our selling expenses, while they did increase again as a percent of sales, they're only 5% more than they were the year before. And then we're much more profitable this year. So then that was money well spent. So then that's kind of the point of those, is to be able to kind of calculate those, look through them, see if anything seems off or anything seems, you know, throws like a red flag up. Okay, then we come to our balance sheet and we would do the same thing. So we've got, let me just page up and see what, okay, it's okay. So if we're going to do a horizontal analysis of the balance sheet, and then we're going to go from 2021 to 2020, and then 2020 to 2019. So really we're doing the same thing though. So we've got current assets, long-term investments, plant assets, total assets. Then we go down to our current liabilities, our common stock, paid in capital, retained earnings, and then our total liabilities and equity. Then we're going to do the same thing that we did above though. So when we're going horizontal, we're always looking at the change. So again, using our parentheses, 52,390 minus 37,924. Again, solve for that first. So that's why they're in parentheses. Then divide by the 37,924. Then our long-term investments are 0 minus 500 divided by 500, which is going to be it should be a negative, I guess. I mean, okay, we'll see what it ends up, but it's like just a negative 100%. Yeah, okay. That's correct, because it's 1. Okay, then our plant assets are 100 minus 96,000. Again, solve for that first, then divide by the 96,000. And then our total assets are 152,390 minus 134,424. Solve for that first, then divide by the 134,424. Then our current liabilities are 22,800 minus 19,960 divided by 19,960. Every time I put that, I forget to put that. Okay, divided by. All right, then common stock is no change. So 72,000 minus 72,000 divided by 72,000. So it'll be 0. Then paid in capital, same thing. 9,000 minus 9,000 divided by 9,000. Our retained earnings, 48,590 minus 33,474 divided by 64. Forgot to put my equal sign in, so my equal sign always tells the calculator I'm doing a computation. And then my total liabilities are 152,390 minus 134,424, and then divide that by 134,424. I think I have too many in here. We'll put in our division, and then let me take away one of those 4s. And then again, these are all percentages, so we can highlight them, make them percents, go out a decimal. Then we'll go from 2020 to 2019. So again, doing the same thing, take the 37,924 minus the 51,748, solve for that first, and then divide by the 51,748. Then that one was a reduction. This next one's a reduction too. So 500 minus 3950 divided by 3950. And then our plant assets are 96,000 minus 60,000 divided by 60,000. And our total plant assets, 134,424 minus 115,698. Solve for that first, and then divide by the 115,698. Then our current liabilities, 19,960 minus 20,300 divided by 20,300. Then our common stock, 72,000 minus 60,000. Then divide that by 60,000. And then our paid in capital, 9,000 minus 6,000 divided by 6,000. And then our retained earnings, 33,464 minus 29,398 divided by 29,398. And then finally, our 134,424 minus the 115,698 divided by the 115,698. And again, make them all percentages, and then go out one more decimal. So again, you can eyeball them to just say, okay, whoops, sorry. What is changing here? So again, there's things that maybe we expected. Plant assets were a huge increase here. We must have purchased something a little smaller than the next year. Some of our paid in capitals increased, but then had no change. So again, it just kind of shows you what's going on, and you'd want to compare it to what you know what has happened. So then now we've got our vertical. So our vertical analysis of the balance sheet, and again, we'll just do the 2 years like we did above. So our current assets, we take the 52,390, and then we divide that by our total assets. So then our total assets are 152,390. Then we take the long-term investments, divide them by the total assets, and that's 0. Then we take our property, plant, and equipment, or our plant assets and divide that by the total assets. Then our liabilities divided by those total assets. The common stock divided by the total assets. Our paid in capital divided by the 152,390, again, the total assets. The retained earnings, 48,590, divided by the total assets. So then again, we can make those percentages, make them one more decimal, and then that tells us what percent our current assets make up of our total assets. And obviously you could do the total assets and they might make you do that in the homework, but it's going to be 100%. Same with down here. Our total liabilities and equity is 100% of our assets. So if you have to include that, and I think they probably make you do it in the homework. Okay, then we'll do the next year too. So then we take the 37,924, divide it by those total assets, which are 134,424. Then we take the 500 divided by the 134,424. Then we take the 96,000 divided by the 134,424. And then again, take the 134,424 divided by the 134,424, and you'll get 100%. Then your current liabilities, 19,960 divided by 134,424. Then 72,000 divided by 134,424. Then 9,000 divided by 134,424. 33,464 divided by 134,424. And then 134,424 divided by 134,424 gives us what? So you can see again, it's very tedious and somewhat time consuming, which is why I hate to do them on the board. So I feel like it's a little bit easier to see them here in Excel. And then really once you know how to do one of the rows, it's just the same thing over and over again. So we've got our horizontal analysis of the income statement and our vertical analysis of the income statement, and then our horizontal analysis of the balance sheet, and then the vertical analysis of the balance sheet. So those are two methods that we use to analyze the financial statements. And then I'll do a separate video for the financial ratios that we'll compute.